Committee. And this is a much anticipated meeting. It's a first hybrid meeting that we've had in some time. So I want to welcome those that were able to join us in the chamber and those that have joined us online. And again, bear with us if we run into any difficulties, because it's been some time since we've operated in a hybrid format. But we'll give it our best shot and we'll get through it. So I'm going to hand over to John now to take members' attendance and apologies.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. To all members of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, you're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of the committee, which will be a hybrid meeting, as the Chair has mentioned, conducted remotely via WebEx and physically here in the Council Chamber, Tuesday, 1st of October at 4 o'clock. And starting, as always, members, with the roll call. Alderman Cook.
Online, John.
Thank you. Alderman Hussey. Alderman Wilkinson. Councillor Boggs.
Apologies, John, for Alderman Wilkinson.
Thank you. Councillor Donnelly.
Anshaw.
Councillor Sandra Duffy. Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Heaney.
Sure.
Councillor Jackson. Councillor McDaid.
On way.
Councillor McGinley.
Anshaw.
Councillor Mooney.
On way.
Councillor O'Farrell.
Anshaw, Lena John.
And Councillor Tierney.
Here, John.
Thank you, members.
Okay, thank you, John. I'd now, moving on to the broadcasting statement, I'd like to remind everyone physically present at the meeting or in attendance remotely that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you're consented to be filmed and the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded they only have their mics and cameras on when speaking at the meeting, and they use the chat facility to highlight their request to speak. A copy of the Council's privacy notice may be found on the Council website. So, as I said, members, this is our first meeting in hybrid format in some way and some time. So, hopefully, if those that are online use the chat box to request to speak, and I'll try to be mindful to keep my eye on the chat box, and as usual, if members indicate in the chamber. So, moving on to declarations of members' interest, Councillor Heaney.
Just to declare an interest in item 8, Chair. I work on a project funded by the Shared Prosperity Fund, so just to declare that.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest online? No. So moving on now to open for decision, and it's on the back of a notice of motion. We have Jerry McKenna, Professor Jerry McKenna, and Sinead Rorden here as a deputation. Jerry is a member of the Royal Irish Academy. He's a chair, and the North-South Standing Committee. Sinead is head of policy and international relations. A huge welcome to your committee, and we try and keep the deputations to within 15 minutes, but there will be an opportunity for questions and answers at the end of it. So I'll hand over to yourselves to take us through the presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair, and just to say how delighted we are to be here, and thank you very much for inviting us and allowing us to participate. As the Chair said, we're really here to say a little bit about the report which we produced, Finding Common Ground, which relates to higher and further education in the northwest of the island of Ireland. It's a Royal Irish Academy report. And just next slide. We just say a little bit about the Royal Irish Academy. It's independent all-island learned society. It's the national academy for this island, and it was established in 1785. It has approximately 600 members, of which about 20% are based in the north. Its membership's by election, but it's based on distinction in scholarship and research in the sciences, engineering, humanities, social sciences, and public service. And we have very close links with other sister academies across these islands, including the Royal Society, British Academy, Royal Society of Edinburgh, etc. Those are very valuable links from our perspective. The most important thing to say is the Royal Irish Academy is independent. Although we receive funds from government, we are independent, and we reach our particular views on particular issues as we feel appropriate. Next slide. In terms of what we do, we contribute to public debate and policy formation on various issues, not just in education, but research, science, technology, and culture. We provide an independent forum for discussion and knowledge exchange. We bring together various partners in decision-making, from government to policymakers, civil society, industry, etc., to discuss issues of common interest. And we lead a number of important research programs, particularly in cultural heritage. We have a number of collections in the Academy and a very extensive library, and we support early career researchers and scholars in various ways. But we engage with the public and stakeholders through regular events and talks and exhibitions. Next slide. Now, one thing we did in the Academy in 2020, it was just at the start of COVID actually, is we established a higher education futures task force. It was established by the President and the officers in the Academy, with myself as the chair. And its aim was to develop a viable vision for higher education on the island of Ireland up to 2035. And there were major factors which led to that, including COVID-19 itself, but also Brexit, new delivery modalities, technological university development, regional pressures, etc., potential for north-south collaboration, and so on. And that task force involved 5 subgroups, but it had a very wide consultation exercise with input from over 100 organisations, stakeholders, interested parties, and individuals across the island. We had 5 task force subgroups, each of which produced a report, but all of which were approved by the overall task force, which had 38 members. And the 5 reports are shown here. One was about a vision for higher education in the future. Second was the future landscape for higher education. Another one was on equality, diversity, and inclusion. A fourth one was on reimagining research and innovation in higher education on the island in the future. And the one of most significance for today's presentation was the report on regions and place in higher education across the island of Ireland. When we looked at the particular regions and provision or under provision that was there, and 2 particular regions jumped out at us in that analysis. One was the south east of Ireland, and the other was the northwest. And by the northwest, we were looking at the whole span of the northwest, from Mayo right through Derry at the centre, right through to Coleraine and even into Antrim. And next slide, please. So we considered in particular in that report the underdevelopment of the Northwest region, and I've just mentioned the range of what we call the Greater Northwest, and we were very strongly of the opinion that there did need to be cross-border regional planning and oversight of tertiary education to supply the needs and allow the region to develop as fully as it could, and which had not been given the opportunity to do so for a very long period of time. We saw an enhanced role for further education in higher education delivery and great potential for increased cross-border higher education institutional infrastructure. Indeed, we raised the issue of the possibility of a cross-border higher education institution being developed. And one thing that we were particularly strong about was the independent oversight of higher education, both in terms of that development, but generally in terms of Northern Ireland. And that's an issue which we have brought to the attention of the department in Northern Ireland on a number of occasions over the last number of years, that Northern Ireland is the only region in these islands which has no independent oversight of higher education. And we think that's a serious anomaly. Next slide, please. So in terms of the Greater Northwest and our most recent report, again, which was building on that previous report, there were major issues identified. The limitations on student numbers imposed by the Mazen cap on student numbers. We noted the net brain drain from Northern Ireland, the equivalent of a full-size university, involves young people from Northern Ireland studying, particularly in Great Britain, many of whom are reluctant leavers. We looked particularly at the skewed distribution of student numbers in Northern Ireland towards Belfast, and we felt that there was a need for differentiated action, or what used to be referred to as affirmative action, to support the Northwest, and that would involve issues like differential fees, increased maintenance support to encourage the numbers to grow here in the event of the Mazen cap being released. And as I'll come back to later, it's not just a simple matter of releasing the Mazen cap. You need to parallel that with incentives to increase the student numbers. Next slide. We noted the major challenges facing the Northwest, and they'll be well known to all of you. Infrastructure deficits relative to other regions on the island, road, rail, etc. Lower levels of economic performance, population growth, educational attainment, and participation in higher education. We noted the low student mobility to Northwest campuses from other regions across the island. And we noted the level of ambition, or perhaps lack of ambition, to grow student numbers to a range comparable with other major population centres on the island. Next slide. And we couldn't help but feel that the Northwest was suffering from peripherality in a way that the major cities weren't. So if you look at Dublin, you have the Parliament there, you have the government departments, you have the banks, the financial capital. The same applies in Belfast, but the Northwest doesn't have that level of infrastructural support and financial support, and therefore suffers, we felt, by comparison. Next slide. Now, I mentioned the lack of oversight of higher education in Northern Ireland. In Northern Ireland, we have 10 autonomous, independent, further and higher education institutions. You have the University of Ulster, Queen's University, the Open University. You have 6 further education colleges, and you have the College for Agriculture, Food and Rural Development. These are all essentially autonomous institutions, able to develop their pathways as they feel appropriate, without any oversight other than simply checking financial status, etc. So there's no obvious Northern Ireland higher education strategy. If you want the strategy for higher education in Northern Ireland, you take the plans of those 10 institutions and staple them together. And that is not a strategy for higher education. So we feel very strongly that there is a need for oversight. And rather than going through why you need an oversight body, the issue should be, why isn't there an oversight body in Northern Ireland? Next slide. We were particularly taken by the relative distribution of the student population in cities relative to city size. So, for example, if you take Limerick, population of around 100,000, you have 30,000 students there. Galway with 85,000, you have 27,000 students there. Even Letterkenny with 22,000, you have nearly 4,000 students there. And Derry with 100,000 population plus with just over 5,000 students. And that is clearly out of line with other towns and cities in Ireland. And if you take the next slide, and you look at capital cities, for example, if you look at Belfast, you'll see that 83% of the higher education student population is based in Belfast. You contrast that with capital cities across these islands. You look at Dublin, for example, less than 40%. London, 22%. Edinburgh, 27%. Cardiff, 37%. So Northern Ireland is hugely out of kilter with the rest of the regions in these islands. Next slide. Now, we did note, for example, in a positive way, some of the positive developments that have occurred in the Northwest, including the growth partnership, the city deal, which of course was signed off last week, and we're very delighted about that, and that should be hugely beneficial. Some of the activities south of the border, Project Ireland 2040, the Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster, which brings together various institutions on both sides of the border to cooperate and work together. We note the task force to expand the Magee campus to 10,000 students, which is, again, a positive development. We don't think there should be any ceiling put on that, I would have to say, but nonetheless, that is a positive development, and hopefully that will progress. The development of the Atlantic Technological University involving Letterkenny, Sligo, and Mayo is a very positive development, and we see week by week how that is progressing, that particular university, including the announcement in the last couple of weeks for a veterinary school in Letterkenny. Various research institutions have been established, and of course the medical school and health science developments at Magee are hugely to be welcomed. We looked at the possible future models of tertiary education development to enable the Northwest to grow to the size that we think it should. And again, we don't believe there should be any ceiling on that, or indeed any limitation on what model might emerge over time as to the delivery of higher education in the greater Northwest. So, for example, one model would be the expansion of the Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster, but most importantly with independent oversight. It's very important that it's not simply a question of the institution saying what they will give. There needs to be independent oversight to actually push things along, working with both governments if that is to develop. And that could plan the distribution programs, numbers, research priorities, etc., promote collaboration. So that is certainly a model, but that oversight, we think, is extremely important. An alternative, and perhaps a longer term, but nonetheless, it should be as a potential development, is an independent cross-border federal university, which I think would be a very exciting development. Such a body could be supported by both the Northern Ireland and the Irish governments, each funding activities in their particular jurisdiction, but working closely together with an institution in the Northwest, of the Northwest, focused on the Northwest. And of course, all of this is about regional balance and the imbalance that we've just talked about in terms particularly of student numbers, but also infrastructure generally. And for the higher education, that requires rigorous academic planning, locating attractive, high-demand programs in the regions of under-provision, and in this case, the Northwest. Differentiated positive action to attract students, differential fees, enhanced maintenance allowances. These are things that should be looked at in terms of the growth in the Northwest. It's not enough to simply say, you know, we're opening up, the Mazen cap has been lifted and students come. Well, there have to be incentives to bring students to any particular region for a period at least. And I think that's important. And the development of the Northwest should not be determined by the limitations or competing priorities of individual institutions or other regions or campuses. So if we look, next slide, forward, there's 15 campuses in the greater Northwest, all providing further and higher education. And there's a real opportunity for research and teaching synergies and efficient use of infrastructure in developing the Northwest region. We think this should be overseen by a cross-border independent planning body focused on the needs and opportunities of the Northwest region and inputting to the relevant government departments in both jurisdictions. And longer term, the possibility of a federal institution should be considered, and that should not be regarded as a failure on the part of any existing institutions. It should be seen as part of their success, actually. And just in case people talk about that cross-border bodies or developments are, but next slide, please. There are a number of cross-border bodies that are functioning very effectively on the island, and they're listed here, some of them. And of course, we already have a number of North-South research centres on the island working very effectively, some funded by the Science Foundation Ireland and some by the Shared Island Unit. So these can work very effectively. Next slide. So we see the potential for a Northwest economic corridor. You see that as well, stretching from Mayo to Coleraine with Derry, Londonderry as the central hub of that, the key city, and with cross-border regional planning and oversight. And for that to happen, you need appropriate infrastructure, you need better communications, you need better business infrastructure, and you need expanded tertiary education. So focused on the region, for the region. And that will require inputs from the Irish government, the Northern Ireland Executive, the UK government, and the EU have all got parts to play in that development. And just to finish, next slide. As we said in our task force report, experience has demonstrated that solutions to regional inequality need to be place sensitive, with policies that are informed by theory and empirical evidence, but that also respond to the structural opportunities, the potential, and the constraints of each place. Each place has its niche, and the Northwest has a real opportunity to develop its niche even more strongly than it has now. And I would quote, give you the quote from the eminent economist Andres Rodriguez Pose, who said, "Recent history should teach us to beware of the revenge of the places that don't matter." You think of, for example, the Rust Belt in the United States, you think of the north and northwest of England in relation to Brexit, and you see how these places that don't matter at a certain point do matter. So just to finish, to note the next slide, final slide, just to note the support of the Irish Research Council and the Shared Island Unit, supported by a grant. And I would want to thank particularly Sinead Reardon, my colleague from the Royal Irish Academy, and her colleague Jennifer Keneally for the amount of work they put in. I would also want to thank members of the Hume Foundation, Tim Atwood, Paul Arthur and Mark Durkin, who also played a very important role in convening meetings to enable the various work to be progressed. So that's all I have to say at the moment. We're happy to try and answer questions or receive comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor McKenna, and I'm going to open it up to the floor, those in the chamber and those online. I have two indicated speakers, Councillor Harkin and then Councillor McGinley.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to come in, and big welcome to Jerry and to Sinead. Thanks for coming in today to share your report, and thank you for doing the report and the work. I think that it's led to a lot of really fruitful discussions about how we can advance university provision here in Derry and in the Northwest, and I'm sure you're well aware of the massive ambition that we have here for an expanded university sector and how much it is central really to the development of the expanded economy for Derry and the Northwest, but also for meeting the aspirations of young people here, so we see fewer people leaving. So look, there was a lot in the report that I found was really, really useful, but I have a couple of questions. And as part of this motion was to invite yourselves in to talk about the report. The council also gave its support for an oversight body, which I believe is absolutely needed for the North. It exists in the South, it exists across the water. And I think a big issue for us here is that we haven't had an oversight body that is rigorous enough that can actually hold education institutions accountable and government accountable, really, for investment to universities. So as part of this, we actually asked Ulster University, Queen's, and the colleges to give responses. I don't know if you've read them, but they were in the university paper. They were in the agenda papers for the last full council meeting. So I was a bit stunned, to be quite honest, at the Ulster University Vice Chancellor's response. He described the report as insufficiently robust, which I thought was unfair, given the scale of research and effort that went into it. But he also said that he believes that an oversight body is unnecessary, and one, because it doesn't fit with the autonomous nature of universities, which I think is part of the problem with Ulster University, in particular in reference to Derry and the Northwest. But he also goes on to argue that when there was an oversight body, it was wound up and it had absolutely no impact on the distribution of students. And I would just like to get your input into that, if you have thoughts on that question, because this seems to be quite an important one. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. There was an oversight body previously, the Northern Ireland Higher Education Council. It was an advisory body, and its terms were very limited in that it could only advise on issues that the department asked it to advise on. Having said that, it did advise on student numbers and the distribution of student numbers, and was extremely helpful in the development of research and research initiatives, and helped, for example, the development of the support programme for university research, which brought a significant amount of funding to Derry, actually, to Magee. So it was that. But the fact is, the department funds numbers, and the department can decide where those numbers go as the department wishes. And obviously, I think the department would need an oversight body to advise on that. I should also say that prior to the Northern Ireland Higher Education Council, there was the Universities Funding Council Northern Ireland Subcommittee, which also advised and, for example, led to a very substantial building programme at Magee. So it's wrong to say that those bodies did not, even though they were advisory, did not have a significant input. But I would like to think that a future oversight body would have even more power than that, or more control than that. You know, if you're going to say that the numbers are entirely a matter for university autonomy, and I don't agree with that, then you would have to say that, you know, is Ulster taking responsibility for the skewed distribution of student numbers in Northern Ireland over the last number of years? The fact is that the department funds the numbers, and the department has control, but it needs proper advice in order to discuss the distribution. And as I say, it's not simply a matter of just simply, you know, lifting the Mazen cap. There needs to be affirmative action, or I know Sinead doesn't like me using that word, but in order to bring the sorts of student numbers to the Northwest that are necessary, and there are ways of doing that. And you know, you can't just simply, well, I think it was Lyndon Johnson said, you know, you can't take a man who's been shackled, take the chains off and bring him to the start of a race and then say everything's entirely fair. The fact is, you do need for a period some additional support in order to bring that type of development. But the issue of student numbers and autonomy, I'm afraid I have to respectfully disagree on that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McGinley.
Chair, and thank you to Professor McKenna and Sinead for the presentation. I think there's no doubt from within this chamber that there's a need for the expansion of the university and the potential that it's going to unlock for the Northwest region. That commitment has been made abundantly clear by the Minister for Economy, Conor Murphy, since he's taken up office. The task force that's been established by Minister Murphy, which is chaired by Stephen Kelly, has recently only published their interim report, and that report outlines a very clear commitment to this expansion. We would encourage everyone, all party stakeholders, organisations that have an interest, to engage within the work of that task force, because it's only through us all working together that we're going to see any form of positive delivery. In terms of an independent oversight body in tertiary education, surely it's the the accountability mechanism is through elected ministers and their departments. I know that from our perspective, accountability and scrutiny is the responsibility of elected representatives. For that's what we're elected to do. So personally, I wouldn't see the need for an independent aside of that. If the ministers are being held to account and are doing what they're supposed to be doing, which we believe that Conor Murphy will be doing within the Department for Economy. One of the assets on the report as well is that there should be more research and it should be funded through the Irish government and Stormont. Has the RIA made any ask of the Irish government in relation to this? And if so, has there been a response? Thank you.
Well, the first thing to say, of course, ultimately, the responsibility for higher education does rest with the Minister. We accept that. But the Minister requires expert advice in reaching decisions, and that should be independent advice. But ultimately, the decisions are the Ministers and the Department. And of course, as regards the issue of student numbers and autonomy, the very fact that the Minister established a task force to raise numbers at McGee to 10,000 indicates that the autonomy doesn't rest with the university. It rests obviously beyond that. So, but I think there is a need for the Minister needs independent advice. And we're not suggesting this would be some body outside of that. Ultimately, the advice would be to the Minister, as it is in other jurisdictions and other places. The reality is, no, we have not asked the Irish government. I mean, but we've noted, for example, the continued emphasis of the Irish government on increased funding for particularly the Northwest region, and I've mentioned the Atlantic Technological University, but also Derry and McGee, and this does seem to be a priority going forward for certainly the current government, and I would imagine any government that succeeds that.
Thank you. Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Professor McKenna and Sinead for coming here today and for providing the report in advance. I found it very, very useful. The report is obviously titled Finding Common Ground, and I think if we're talking about the expansion and development of higher education places across the Northwest, you won't look any further than trying to find that common ground than within this chamber. As I say, look, I found the report incredibly useful, and I think it will support our calls as a City and District Council to try and make that push from central government to expand higher education places within the Northwest. The report pointed out some of the issues in terms of the expansion of our university and higher education places here in the Northwest. It talked about the Mazen cap, which we have rehearsed within this chamber for many, many times. And I think everyone agrees that one of the key blockages in terms of higher education places within the Northwest is the Mazen cap, and that needs to be re-looked at. It also talked about brain drain and the skewed distribution of student numbers. But in the challenges, where the report talks about the challenges around that the Northwest face around expansion of student numbers, it talks about the level of ambition to grow student numbers. Professor McKenna, I would like to know where and whose level of ambition is that report actually talking about? It doesn't say that within the report. Is that with central government? Is that with the university? Or who do you feel, or does your organisation feel that isn't showing the ambition to grow student numbers within the Northwest? I think it also, on page 12, talks again about student numbers, and I hope that you'll agree, which I found incredibly useful. But when you look at the population size of Derry compared to some of the other places that have been named there, and then you look at the university enrolments for 21-22, I wonder, would you agree with me that us looking for 10,000 students at McGee is quite a modest ask, given the comparisons there? And then when you look at table 2, again, I think that points out that it's quite a modest ask. I wonder, the report doesn't talks about some of the challenges and the blockages. It doesn't talk about what the future of higher education places look like. What do you see people coming here to study? If we are going to 10,000 students, what are they coming here to study, and how do we tackle that? The report, and finally, this is my last question, Chair, you'll be glad to hear. The report also talks about the commitment with a new decade, new approach to expand McGee University up
expand McGee University to 10,000 students, and that the executive will bring forward those proposals. And we've talked about the task force and the job that they're currently doing at the moment. Professor McKenna, I wonder what you or your organisation's opinion would be on the wording around the expansion of the university at McGee up to 10,000 students, which is now included in the draft programme for government. Would you agree with me that that is a backward step from government if that is to be included within the programme for government? And would you encourage people across this district to respond to the consultation to try and remove the two words up to, because I agree with you that 10,000 students should not be a ceiling for university. Thank you.
Yeah, before I bring you in, there was a number of questions in relation to that, and I know that question, the final question was a wee bit of a leading question, but it's only trying to make politics here. But if you can, because there's at least one indicated speaker coming up next, so there may be further questions. So if you can pick up on those few questions, thanks, Professor.
Well, thanks. I mean, I don't think that anybody should be putting a limit on the number of students. I mean, 10,000 students is an important step forward, and I think people should see it as a step forward. And I'm assuming that the intention is to get to that 10,000. So I'm not get into the wording of the task force report, but I'm assuming that that's where it's at. Now, I think you're quite right that it's not just simply 10,000 students. You've got to actually have detailed academic planning to get there, and you need expert input and advice to do that, because something has prevented that figure being reached before. I think also if you begin to, as it were, preclude certain outcomes, like an independent university or like a cross-border university, psychologically that may introduce a ceiling on student numbers. And I do recall actually at one stage when there was a movement to grow the student numbers, particularly at McGee and particularly to develop research, and someone said, you do realize that this is likely to lead to an independent or could lead to an independent university. And the response to that was, well, if that's how the future develops, that's how the future develops. There shouldn't be any ceiling. There shouldn't be any limit to the development. And it really depends on the ambition and the plans and the commitment in the area for the future development. And that should not be constrained by other campuses or other institutions or whatever. So that's, I would certainly say that. But in order to do it, it's not just simply a question of increasing the numbers on the existing programs, for example, because some of them you couldn't increase. Some of the health programs, for example, are limited by quotas. And even though you could get more students, you're not allowed to take more because of the limits imposed by the Department of Health. So it's working together, but there shouldn't be any limit to the ambition. It will find its level eventually, and I don't think anybody in Limerick said there was a limit, or anybody in some of these other places.
Okay, now I have two indicated speakers. I'm going to bring these in, and and we can draw it that close. So, Councillor Farrell and then Alderman Hussey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and welcome, Sinead and Jerry. I'm an SLP councillor, like Councillor Tierney beside me. Obviously, our interim ambition for McGee is 10,000 students. That's the starting point. But if McGee reached 10,000 students overnight and there was no growth at any other campus on this island, Belfast would still have 75% of the university places in the north. And Derry would still have the smallest university population of any city on this island. And we're trying to rectify failure, sort of prolonged failure over the last 60 years. Derry didn't get its fair share since Lockwood. It's failed to get its fair share since. And our view is that independent oversight is essential, because the lack of independent oversight has led to decline and stagnation at McGee, and it's led to a student boom in Belfast. So we view for Derry to get and maintain its fair share, there needs to be independent oversight. We had a motion in May, and Councillor Harkin has alluded to it. One of the outcomes of that motion was that we would write the various institutions across the north and the Stormont executive to ask them their opinion, their view on independent oversight. Various institutions have responded. The Stormont executive has not. And Jerry, I note in your comments at the start, you had various conversations with the department. Would you like to share what their view on oversight is? Thank you.
Yeah, go on, hold on, just to try and keep us going. I'm going to bring Alderman Hussey in, and whatever questions Alderman Hussey has, you can answer both at the same time. So, on ahead, Derek.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for late arrival, both to yourself, Chair, and to the delegation. Totally concur with the remarks that you're hearing across this chamber. The deficit in numbers in the Northwest is scandalous and has to be addressed. Now, I'm well aware of the great work being done in combination with McGee and ATU. The Northwest Regional Development Group are quite well involved in that, as you probably know, and it's great that cooperation is going on, and indeed with the Further Education College. There's a tremendous working partnership there, but at the same time, the issue is the number of students at the McGee campus, and not to divert the total numbers away from the fact that numbers are needed on the McGee campus. Simple as that. That said, I just had one query. You'll be aware that Ulster University has established a strategic policy unit headed by Stephen Farry, and a former SPAD has joined him in that situation. Do you regard that as a development that will assist this Northwest area to progress to the numbers that they should have? Thank you.
On ahead, Professor.
Okay, well, I'll answer that last one maybe first. I mean, obviously, welcome Stephen Farry being involved in a policy oversight body. It's not clear to me what the policies they're actually going to be looking at and whether higher education is one of those. Of course, he was the minister at one stage, and well, that's all I have to say on that. But we'll see. We've had a number of policy bodies over the years in Northern Ireland. As regards the view of the department on oversight, and I should preface that by saying that, the Academy has involved a lot of external experts from outside of Northern Ireland in our various deliberations at various stages, including one where we look particularly at, for example, issues to do with cross-border institutions and how those could develop and work. And all of the folk were amazed that there was no oversight of higher education, independent oversight in Northern Ireland. They found that extraordinarily odd. But we have been making the point to the department for a number of years, actually, the Academy, that Northern Ireland does require independent oversight of higher education. And of course, with the Assembly and the Executive being up and down, sometimes there are ministers there and sometimes there weren't. And sometimes a bit dependent on which civil servant was actually heading the department. Some were actually quite receptive, particularly to the idea of a tertiary education council, and actually asked us to produce a paper to how such a development or the case for such a development. So there was substantial interest. So it waxes and wanes somewhat from time to time and minister to minister. But that's reality. But I think it's incontrovertible that Northern Ireland needs an independent oversight of higher education, and it shouldn't be the question of why it needs it. The question is, why doesn't it have it?
Is there any further speakers? Councillor Duffy.
Just want to make a final comment. I know a lot of questions have been asked. There has been a lot of conversation. And I just want to say I really do welcome the conversation today and welcome the breadth of views across the chamber. And we have had many opportunities over the last 50, 60 years in terms of university expansion, the need for a proper sized university here in Derry. We have absolutely committed to that. We have seen many campaigns through the years. We have seen many papers published and put to the floor. Unfortunately, what we have never seen is ministerial guidance and something being driven by a minister in terms of trying to get something actually delivered here for the city. And I believe that this is the first time in my lifetime that I have seen actual hope for the university to finally see the expansion that it needs. The Minister, Conor Murphy, in terms of pulling together the task force has reported now, and we have a pathway that finally can address some of the really historic wrongs that we have seen over generations. So I feel quite hopeful. But what I also feel quite hopeful for is while we might not always agree on a path, we agree on the outcome. And that is, I think, what is really important that we take away from today, that we do all want to see the delivery of a full-size, proper university here for the city. And I know I'm coming in under chairperson's business, but I want to say the Minister did publish today his report on sub-regional economic plan. So that has been launched today. And within that plan, again, the Minister has given his commitment to 10,000 students at McGee. And absolutely, once we get to 10,000 students, who knows where we go from there, but let's get there first. So thank you for coming today. And I really enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you. I don't see any further indicated speakers and there's nobody online. So all's left for me to do is thank Professor McKenna and Sinead for attending today. And again, it's this chamber has had countless discussions, countless debates, and around the need for university expansion and how the key to our economy and driving forward our economy lies with the university and expansion. So any conversations around how we get there is welcome. And I think it's been alluded a number of times. There's a bit of excitement around. There's a bit of a momentum, and I think it's good that we all play a part in that, and we all feed in to ensure that momentum keeps going, and we finally see the decades of neglect in this part of the world in relation to higher education. And so I want to thank yourselves for all the work that you do in that regard and look forward to working with you in the years ahead. So thank you.
Chair, before we move on to other business arising out of that discussion, I alluded there to the new strategic policy unit at Ulster University. And with your permission, I'd like to propose that we invite Stephen Farry and the strategic policy unit team to address this committee on the issue of the further development of the McGee campus.
Well, thank you, Alderman Hussey, and as you will be well aware, that the opportunity to submit a notice of motion is open. So the time frame in relation to submitting the notice of motion is still available to you, and I think we'll all note that there's a special meeting of council to invite Stephen Kelly to present the findings of that report. So I would suggest that if you want to make a proposal, there's opportunity to raise that through a notice of motion, and I won't be accepting it today.
I accept your ruling, Chair, but would point out that deputations have been proposed and seconded outside of a notice of motion to full council in the past. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to chairperson's business, and I have been contacted by one member, and It's, Councillor Duffy's alluded to it already when speaking to the deputation, so I'm going to bring Sandra in relation to the Economy Minister's statement today.
Thank you, Chair, and I really do welcome your indulgence that it wasn't 24 hours prior to committee, but I just thought that it was an important message today to bring to the Chamber. Minister Murphy did launch his sub-regional economic plan today in the Chamber in Stormont, and I don't know if anybody watches these things, but I certainly was watching with interest because there has been that commitment to address regional imbalance from the government. And I think that today with Connor's plan being launched, we see exactly some of the outworkings of that. And I just want to point out 3 elements to it. So what Connor is looking at is creating local economic partnerships, the restructuring of Invest NI, and then a brand new approach from the Department for Economy itself, with a much bigger role for local councils who will be central to developing our own priorities in conjunction with our economic partners, which I think is absolutely game changing for ourselves. Invest NI also will be tasked with supporting regional balance with a direction that 65% of all investments need to be outside the Belfast area, which again, I think shows the absolute intent of the Economy Minister. And as I alluded to earlier, with regard to higher education, McGee Task Force is again spoken about within the document, with the increase in the campus to 10,000 students as a priority. And finally, what was very good news for this council area is Minister Murphy, in his remarks, gave commitment to take the responsibility for City of Derry Airport into the department, which will give us much stability in terms of the airport for its development and for its connectivity for the wider Northwest. It also has huge benefits for the council area, and I don't need to remind anybody in this chamber with regard to the subsidy that this council pays towards the airport. And I think that this is hugely welcome news and will be an absolute game changer with regard to our own funding strategy around strategic leisure. So I think that this is a really good news day for regional balance. It's a really good news story for Derry City and Strabane District Council. And I just thought it was important to point that out today at today's committee. So thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hargan.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in. And it was just responding to Councillor Duffy's remarks there. I haven't seen the document yet, but I look forward to reading it. If it is the case that the Minister has agreed to take on, for the department to take on the funding for the City of Derry Airport, that will be welcomed. You know, we know that this costs City of Derry Airport is a burden on our tax ratepayers of $3.5 million a year, if not more. And to lift that burden, I think, would be a very good outcome for this council. And if it is the case that that's happened, I think that, you know, I would commend the council because we have been a constant advocate for this. And I think that it'll be very much welcome news to ratepayers right across this district. So I look forward to reading the document and hearing more about it. But that would be, I would consider that a victory for the council's campaign around the, you know, for central government to take on funding responsibility for City of Derry Airport. I'd also consider it a people power victory as well. Thank you, Chair.
All right then. Alderman Halsey.
Thank you, Chair, and to thank Councillor Duffy for the information provided. The devil, of course, will be in the detail as we move forward. As I think Councillor Perkins referred to that as well. I attended the NULGA programme for the government consultation yesterday, and one of the I had expressed severe disappointment that with regard to regional imbalance, the only reference was to tourism that they seem to be looking at within that document. But to hear that other ministers, particularly Minister Murphy, is expanding the remit within his department to include proper addressing of regional imbalance is welcome. And I would trust that other ministers are able to take that lead and move forward and address regional imbalance properly, rather than what we did have many years ago. I think it was Margaret Ritchie who introduced the term rural proofing, which absolutely meant nothing unless it was actually being done. So, if we can move to a point where regional imbalance is being properly addressed, so much the better. Thank you, Chair.
And I appreciate that that the announcement was only made today, so there's maybe we can ask officers to pick that up, and a report will be brought back to future committee with more detail in relation to the commitments made by the Master today. Are members okay with that? Yep.
I had indicated to speak. All right, thank you. Chair, you'll forgive me, but respectfully, I find it hard to believe that I was accused of playing politics or something in an earlier discussion. And then we hear Councillor Duffy's last two contributions, and there was nothing mentioned. I find it incredibly strange. But however, I, like Councillor Harkin, have heard about the Minister's announcement. I haven't had the time to read the full detail of it. If it is what Councillor Duffy's reporting, and they are looking to take over and look after the finances for City Dare Airport, that is a massive step for this council. There's no two ways about it. And I would certainly welcome that financial burden being taken off the shoulders of ratepayers across the city and district. Councillor Harkin says it's a victory for this council. I think it's a victory for everybody across the Northwest, across this council area. I think it's a victory for the Coda Board. I think it's a victory for ratepayers, and I think it's a victory for this council. Any of the other commitments that I have seen that the Minister has announced today, a bit like Professor McKenna referenced earlier on, when he didn't mention it, but he talked about the one plan. We've had similar commitments before. I cautiously welcome what I have seen that the Minister is planning to do with Invest NI and tackling regional imbalance and all of that. It's a bit like the task force. It's a bit like I said whenever the executive was reformed. I'll wait and see the proof, and the proof in the pudding is eaten. So we'll see what comes off it. But if it comes off it, then that's also well and so good. Thank you.
And I suppose people living in this city and district have borne the scars of commitments that haven't been delivered. So in relation to the sentiments that's been expressed, it's completely understandable. But when there's and I haven't seen the detail of the announcement today, but when we've heard from ministers that they're going to do something, and then they commit and follow it through, it should be welcomed. And I've no doubt that this committee and this council would welcome a significant shift towards addressing regional imbalance and disparity. Members, the second piece of chairperson's business is my own, and it's just to reflect on this situation that's unfolding in the Middle East. And I know that there's protests organised for tomorrow, and there's a major mobilisation throughout the city and district on October the 7th to mark a year of genocide in Gaza. It's extremely worrying that despite what's happening, despite interjections from international courts, the state of Israel has significantly escalated what's going on, and that's from a humanitarian perspective, it's extremely concerning and worrying. And I suppose we're always searching for what we can do, how we can be a voice for those that don't have a platform, that are either in Gaza, Lebanon, or on the West Bank, that are under threat or under attack from the Israeli state. And so it's more important now than ever for us to be united in that voice. And for as chair of the committee, I would just encourage anybody available to attend the demonstrations either tomorrow or on the 7th of October. And this is the last committee, last meeting of this committee before then. So I wanted to use this opportunity to raise it. So moving on now to the matters arising from the minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, the 3rd of September, pages 21 to 38. Matters arising, Councillor Harger.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome your remarks, first of all, on the situation in Lebanon and Yemen and Syria. It's a dangerous escalation, and I encourage people to join the protest tomorrow at the War Memorial at 6 o'clock. And it's good to see so many political parties and trade unions endorsing that. So I wanted to raise briefly, it's GSP 156/24. It's the winter fuel. It's about the winter fuel payment. Today is International Day of Older People, and I think that is it's a significant day, given that a lot of older people across our district and across the north are worried about what the winter months will bring, and we've discussed this in the chamber many times, and I think that it should be highlighted as often as possible. And I just wanted to say that, look, the DFC Minister, Gordon Lyons, had been talking positively about the uptake in the number of people who had applied for pension credit. And he pointed to the fact that 889 people have applied for it and probably will receive it. And this is an increase. The numbers are based on the August numbers, and that's up from 611 in August last year. So that looks like a good increase. But to be honest, the number of people who will lose the winter fuel payment is almost 250,000. So 889 is not a lot. And the number of people who could receive pension credit in the north but is more than 26,000. So it seems to me that the minister isn't actually doing enough to encourage more people to access pension credit. And I don't think it's good enough just to kind of put that responsibility on the already stretched independent advice services. So I think the minister should be doing more to get more people signed up for pension credit. But then there's also the issue of the winter fuel payment as well. And I just wanted to bring it to members' attention if they haven't already seen it. But Unite, the trade union, and others have organised a protest on October 7th at 11 a.m. Calling at Stormont, called for the winter fuel payment to be reinstated. And I think that that's an important step because this campaign around reversing that decision that was made in Westminster and Stormont, I think that people will see that there'll be growing campaign and activism around that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Declared pecuniary interest.
Okay. Any other matters arising? Moving on to item 8, the shared prosperity communities and place funding. Alfie is going to take us through that.
Thanks, Chair. Members, the report is to update you on progress in respect of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, Communities in Place funding. You'll recall at last month's committee, due to just having received notice, we provided a verbal update in relation to funding of 9.85 million that had just been made available to the 11 Northern Ireland councils through this fund. And out of that, our council will be receiving 780k based on the standard population methodology methodology. We advised members what we knew at the meeting at that point, that the funding could be utilised against a range of 15 interventions, both capital and revenue, which were detailed in the guidance and are also attached to today's report for your information. So whilst the funding is obviously very positive, members, we highlighted two key issues at last month's meeting. Firstly, that an application had to be submitted by 19th of September, obviously a very short and challenging turnaround, although we highlighted also that it could be submitted subject to council approval and amended accordingly. The second challenge we highlighted is that the expenditure has to be spent by 31st of March 25, although it can fund retrospectively back until 1st of April 24. So that basically means that projects that are already underway could be considered. It's very clear that those deadlines are hard deadlines, and that will be the key determining criteria in respect of considering applications. Against this, members, we were advised that the funding could be used as a first resort to enable councils to reallocate funds which they've allocated to other schemes to be spent in future years. So on that basis, members, this committee agreed that we would submit an application by the 19th of September and we bring back a report to this month's committee for endorsement amendment as required. Just a couple of other points to note. With the exception of the hard expenditure deadlines, the application process has been fairly straightforward, and the department facilitated one-to-one clinics to ensure that what we were submitting would be eligible. And secondly, the decisions on our application are expected effectively next week, following which we'll receive 50% to 80% of the money into our bank straight away, with the rest to follow in January. So members, in terms of progressing it, obviously given the significance of the funding secured, as well as the extent of competing priorities and capital projects that we're trying to progress, a key consideration for us as officers was to ensure that proper consideration and member engagement could be facilitated, and that normally is done through our normal capital and corporate projects planning group process. So accordingly, and as highlighted in an option, we agreed to proceed with an application by the 19th of September for two capital projects against which we had already allocated funding, that funding then being freed up for subsequent consideration in the coming weeks and months. And the two projects, based on discussions with the funders that ticked all the boxes, were the Ballynagard project and the Stradone Green project, or Stradone Greenway project. So these enable their minimal risk, they enable the deadlines to be met, and most importantly, they now enable us to properly consider this as officers and members in terms of what that funding can be allocated towards. So members, on that basis, you're asked to endorse the submission that was made in relation to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund in relation to those two projects. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. I think we got the announcement late at the last committee, but it's great to see more of the information being rolled out and how we intend to see the process going. Open it up to the floor, Councillor Heaney.
Chair, and I'm happy to propose this item. Any additional resource coming into this council is obviously to be welcomed, and if this does allow us to free up other funds that can be reallocated to other capital projects, then that's obviously a good thing, and just reminds us that there are many capital projects across the district that still require funding. So I would call again for an urgent meeting of the capital working group just to try and progress that and make use of this funds and other funds that have been freed up previously. So thanks.
Okay, thanks, Connor. Just on that point, before I bring anybody else in, can I bring the Chief Executive and just to give a bit of an update around the capital working group?
Yeah, Chair, just very briefly, met yesterday, Alfie and myself, to draft out a potential agenda for the capital working group, and we'll get notification out to members now of a meeting in coming weeks. There's a massive amount going on at the moment, so we'll try and bring that all together in a very coherent form. So we'll advance that as soon as possible. But also just to say, this is an ideal type of funding that enables us to backdate. It enables us to free up money that we've already committed. It's guaranteed in terms of delivery because we are able to deliver these projects by the closure date, and then it enables us to put that money back into the pot for members to consider on future priorities. So I trust you will endorse this decision today and we move forward with this money now available to us for future projects.
Okay, so just for clarity, we expect a meeting of the Capital Working Group within weeks. Alderman Hussey?
Thank you, Chair. And happy to second the proposal and the recommendation. And with regard to 3.1, Chief Executive has already referred there to the diversion of funding that is now enabled by this funding coming in from outside. And I note Ballinagard, I welcome the three projects which are there. Ballinagard includes a play park, and you will know, Chair, and others in this chamber will know my concern at the deficit in play provision that exists throughout our council area. So within the Capital Working Group, you can expect the bid for diversion for like. If funding has been found for a play facility, that funding would continue in the same scheme or the same line going forward. But welcome the input of funding from elsewhere, as occurred previously with regard to 3 play areas in my own area. Funding came from elsewhere. It enabled funding then to be rediverted. So very welcome. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Tierney?
Chair, it's just to join me others and welcome this funding and funding opportunity. Obviously, we got this lit last month in terms of at this committee, and I want to just acknowledge the officer team as well for getting it turned around with a very, very tight deadline to get it in. But whilst it's only 2 projects in 2 particular areas that are benefiting from this funding, God knows where else will benefit when the money attached to them is redistributed. So I think this is good. And I absolutely welcome it. And I know the people in Ballinagard will definitely welcome their share of this and seeing this getting going. But we also look forward to a meeting of the Capital Development Group to see how we take this forward and how we now reallocate funding. Thank you.
Okay, so proposed by Councillor Heaney, seconded by Alderman Hussey. Everybody in favour? There's no dissenting voices and no indicated speakers online. So move on to item 9, update on a motion on becoming a care confident employer. Paula?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide members with an update and proposal on the progress of becoming a care confident employer in collaboration with Carers Northern Ireland as per a recent council motion. So in terms of some background, working carers are people who balance their paid employment with providing unpaid care for a relative or friend who, because of health and care needs, would not be able to manage without that help. And it's estimated that 1 in 7 people in every workplace will be caring for someone. And so it's important to have the right support in the workplace, as it can have a truly significant impact on carers. Working carers often feel uncomfortable discussing their caring role in the workplace, and many struggle to manage combining their caring role with employment. So as the number of people providing unpaid care increases, so does the number of working carers. Carers UK now estimate that over a quarter of all workers are juggling work and care. So Care Confidence is a national benchmarking scheme which supports organisations to build a positive and inclusive workplace for staff who are working carers and to make sure they are recognised, respected and supported. And Care Confident has been designed to support organisations to work progressively through 3 levels. And to achieve this accreditation, Council will have to concentrate on 5 key areas: implementing formal policies to support carers, providing training and resources for carers, raising awareness about carer support and offering practical assistance to carers, and leading on new initiatives in carer support. Being a care confident organisation offers several benefits. It helps retain experienced staff. It also makes the organisation more attractive to potential new staff, enhancing our reputation as an employer of choice. In terms of the financial implications associated with this initiative, for the application, the assessment and ongoing support and guidance, it's in the region of £2,000. And the accreditation is valid for 3 years, and it demonstrates our ongoing commitment to supporting and developing our workforce. So it's recommended that members approve the progress of the project as outlined.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for being late at the start of the meeting there. Thank you, Paula, for the report. A lot of work has gone on it. This was actually a motion that I had brought because of the unmet need across the across everywhere for carers. Obviously, if we can start here in council, and then the good work might be spread out across all our businesses and employers across the City and District. These are great first steps. I know there's not much more to say. I think you've outlined it really well in your report and what you're saying there. I think it's good that it's in 3 levels. It kind of makes it more easier to work through as a business here. So it's great first steps, and I'm happy to propose that we accept the recommendations, and hopefully now workers here in the council feel more supported and they'll be able to stay in their work for longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Cook.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in. I just wanted to note that it would be great for this to be set in stone here, and for the council to be leading the way on this very important scheme. Like we all know someone who is a carer. I know of some that sit in the chamber alongside us. So and the strains that it can cause whilst working. So it's a brilliant opportunity for employers and employees to provide the much needed support for carers. So I just want to thank the council officers for all their hard work this far, and I look forward to hopefully seeing this implemented. Thank you.
Okay, and given your endorsement, Alderman Cook, can I take it as your second on the proposal?
Yes, I'll second.
Okay, so we have a proposal by Councillor McDade, seconded by Alderman Cook. There's no dissenting voices and no further indicated speakers, so I'm going to take that as unanimous. Back over to Paula again, item 10. On an update on a motion on the onus safe place designation.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide members with an update and proposal on the progress of implementing the safe place designation for domestic abuse victims in collaboration with ONUS and Northern Ireland, again as per a recent council motion. And just in terms of background, so the council acknowledges with great concern the high levels of domestic abuse across Northern Ireland, as evidenced by figures indicating that 1 in 4 women will experience domestic abuse in their lifetimes, and over 33,000 incidents were reported in 21-22. Again, additionally, it's alarming that in 90% of these incidents, children are present in the same or adjacent room where violence occurs. The council affirms that everyone should have a safe place from domestic abuse and recognises the commendable work of ONUS Northern Ireland, a social enterprise offering specialist training and consultancy services on domestic violence and abuse. So consequently, the council resolves to engage with ONUS NI to achieve equivalent training for Derry City and Strabane District Council facilities to be designated as a safe place. And again, notably, 5 councils across Northern Ireland have already undertaken this training and have become designated safe places. So launched by ONUS in February 2011, the Safe Place campaign has gained support from a diverse array of organisations, including the PSNI, Health and Social Service Trust and the Northern Ireland Civil Service. It provides comprehensive support to organisations aiming to become a safe place for victims of domestic and sexual violence or abuse. It offers specialist training to educate staff on domestic violence and abuse and equips them with the knowledge to create a supportive environment for victims. And the training is structured into 3 tiers, Tier 1, Tier 2 and Tier 3. And the training is a blended approach. It includes online sessions, interactive sessions and some post-training resources as well. In order to bring this initiative forward, we're recommending and have identified that a cross-departmental approach is essential for this project's success. So we have therefore formed a dedicated working group within the council to oversee the implementation and ongoing management of the Safe Place initiative. And again, I've outlined there the council's work the working group, what they will be responsible for. So again, you know, the advantages of becoming a designated safe place organisation can significantly contribute to the safety and well-being of individuals within the workplace facing domestic abuse. It also strengthens our reputation as a proactive and caring organisation, and it helps foster a culture of empathy and support among employees. So in terms of the financial implications of this initiative, it is mainly in relation to training and will be in the region of about £350 per course. There's also an annual review fee of the accreditation, which will cost in the region of £500, and there may be ad hoc spend required for some promotional resources. So it's recommended that members approve the progress of this project as outlined. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Any indicated speakers? Councillor McGinley.
Chair, and thank you to Paula for the report. I'm just happy to propose the recommendation within the report. I think it's really important that we are a safe space for all victims of domestic abuse and violence. So thank you for the work that you and your team have put into it, Paula.
Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to second it. And thanks again, Paula, for doing all the work on this report as well. This was another one of my motions, so I've caused a bit of work this month for you. I think it's something that I feel really passionate about, and I think that I welcome the cross-departmental approach to it because this needs to be done right, because it's too important. But I hope that doesn't make it take too long whenever there's too many people beating on it. I hope it's implemented as soon as possible, because every day people are dying, women are dying as a result of domestic violence, so we can't take it any more seriously, or any less seriously. And I know the next paper is about women's safety as well at night, so I think it's good that these papers are being brought together because it makes us more thinking about it more awarely as well. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Alderman Cook.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in. Just again, I think it's a positive step for our council to be involved in providing a safe space for domestic violence victims. And I think, like Councillor McDade, the cross-departmental approach, I think is positive. So, and I do think that the working group is a great way to get it off the ground. So thanks very much.
Thank you. So proposer from Councillor McGinley, seconded by Councillor McDade. And just before I take it, I think it's important that a male's voice is heard in relation to this, because the scourge of violence against women and girls it needs to be tackled. It needs to be tackled head on. And initiatives such as this from our council are much welcome, and it's at least it's a step towards, but it needs to be part of a much bigger piece of work, and that's in terms of the violence against women and girls strategy. Is we need to see the implementation of that and that rolled out, so we can have a society where women and girls are as safe as everybody else. So thanks, Paula, and I'm going to take that as unanimous. Okay, and as Councillor McDade alluded to, the next item is item 11, the Women's Night Safety Charter, and it's Ellen that's taking us through that.
Thank you, Chair. This report aims to provide elected members with information on the Women's Night Safety Charter, and also to seek approval in principle and subject to the agreement, because we have a draft at the minute of a cross-departmental action plan, and then council sign up to this charter. As highlighted in the report, Hospitality Ulster and in liaison with White Ribbon NI, who are a charity, have teamed up to roll out the charter across Northern Ireland and have written to all councils on this. The charter has also been adopted across several regions in the UK, and aims to support the campaign to end violence against women and girls. And locally, the Executive Office's team, in terms of ending violence against women and girls, are supporting this initiative, along with the PSNI and Tourism and Translink have already signed up. Again, as highlighted in the report, The charter requires commitment to 7 areas and a number of pledges which are highlighted for members' information in sections 3.1 and 2. Also, in the context of this whole area, the report just highlights that the City Centre Initiative also currently hold the Purple Flag status for excellence in the evening nighttime economy, and that there can be a link there as well in terms of crime and violence and antisocial behaviour. And as you've previously heard here, the Council are also taking forward the designation as a safe place for victims and domestic abuse. So those 2 latter initiatives, together with this charter, are actually complementary in working together to combat violence against women and girls. And as I say, the only point I would also highlight is that a number of councils have already signed up to this charter, and they're particularly relevant in terms of service areas which are open in the evenings or at night time. Although I would say that some councils have raised some concerns about the ability to meet all the expectations of the charter, specifically in terms of all public spaces and workspaces. The recommendation in front of members, or sorry, before I do that, I should say that because we're currently doing work in this area, it's envisaged that the costs in terms of the initial implementation of the charter will be accommodated within existing budgets. But if there's any change to this, further report will be prepared. And the recommendation for members' consideration today is that you approve in principle that the Council sign up to the Women's Night Safety Charter. Thank you, members.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ellen, for the report. And Chair, just to follow on from some of your remarks around the violence against women and girls strategy, because I think this is really relevant to it. As a mother of 2 daughters, I worry all the time. I mean, as a woman, we are very used to walking with keys in our hands, using our mobile phone, using earphones, using other things as barriers of protection to ourselves when we are out on our own, walking or in public spaces. But I very recently did a meeting with a young women's group just around some of the issues that they face and their feelings around, particularly the violence against women and girls strategy. And I was absolutely horrified and shocked at how poor their confidence is in reporting incidents of abuse, harassment when they are out. They have no confidence in being believed. So therefore, they just simply don't report. That to me gave me huge concern as to what our young women are facing when they are out on a night out for a walk, out doing whatever, because they would rather not report and not go through the embarrassment, the harassment that they feel that they would face through reporting. So I think initiatives like this are hugely important for us to ensure that we're getting a message out there that women should feel safe. They absolutely should be safe, and that we will advocate and we will support and we will build confidence in the services that are out there, because I don't want any young woman being anywhere and being abused or intimidated and going home and not reporting it. I just think that's a frightening place for anyone to be in. So I think that it's really important that we do work. We might have difficulty trying to implement everything, but if we don't try, we'll not implement anything. So I think it's really important that we bring these strategies forward. So thank you again, Ellen.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to second the proposal. And thanks, Ellen. I actually agree with absolutely everything you've just said, Sandra. I think that we all know how scary it can be to be as a woman out and about at night, especially. And now as the darker nights come in, it's not just about going out to bars and all. It's when you're out walking your dog along the quay, or you choose the quay because there's lights. You can't go down the bay because there's not lights. You know, you plan your journey to where you're going to feel safe because it's dark from 5:30 in the day. From looking at the recommendations, or the commitments, most of them are practical and reasonable. And even just thinking about practical things like the last ones, design in public space and workplaces to make people feel safer. Like that needs to be whenever our planning committee. So whenever a planning application comes in, you're considering in this dwelling or in this building, whatever it might be, if a woman comes in, will they feel safe? Is there dark corners? You know, just thinking about that at all areas of our, you know, all areas of council, not just like implementing it here in the chamber and talking about it. We actually need to be thinking practically how we can implement it. But I'm sure I'll come up with other things whenever I think about it, but that was the first thing popped into my head. But no, I'm really happy to welcome it. I think it's really proactive of the council to do it, implement it straight away and get involved and do what we can. But thanks very much.
You, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair. And can I say I welcome the recommendation. You asked for a male voice in the previous one, you're getting it in this one. And I'm coming at this from several aspects. Firstly, of course, as somebody who works in hospitality myself, I'm aware of the issues that can arise through the nighttime economy and the major issue of getting home safe. I note that Tourism NI and TransLink are included in this report. I would hope that taxi driving associations will be included within work going forward. And that's particularly an issue in rural areas. In 4.1, it refers to positive benefit in both urban and rural areas. Can I assure you that it will be more difficult in the rural areas because of the lack of that ability for folk to be able, when they want to get home, because there simply isn't the transport infrastructure to assist those who want to go home safely. And I know that many in my own trade where proprietors and staff will actually take the cars out and leave folk home themselves to ensure that there is folk can get home safely. So it's welcome that this is here, but I would like to think that it is genuine positive benefit moving forward for urban and rural areas. Reference the confidence in reporting issue. I take on board what Councillor Duffy has said there and agree with her. One of the issues in confidence in reporting is actually the follow-up that can't be there. And you know, the issue of police numbers has been highlighted left, right, and centre. And when folk are reporting and it takes so long for any sort of action, it erodes any confidence that people have when they're reporting. So you know, it's an intertwined scenario where everything is impacting and everything else, and I trust that we can accept that. But I would, at the same time, urge that any incident is still reported. I know there's that lack of confidence, but the authorities look at reports, not what the dogs in the street are saying. So people do need to report at any time, whether they have a confidence in that or not, get the report in. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have a proposal from Councillor Duffy, seconded by Councillor McDade. I don't hear any dissenting voices and there's no further indicated speakers, so I'm going to take that as unanimous. And move on to item 12, the member learning and development activities. And again, it's Ellen that's going to take us through that.
And thank you, Chair. This report aims to inform members of the outcome of the assessment of the effectiveness of the learning and development activities for year one. Also to ask you to note the information in terms of areas for improvement and the learning and development programme for year two. To approve the learning and development action plan for 24-25. And also to make a decision in terms of, or to give consideration to the value of continuing the elected member development Charter Plus Award. As indicated in the report, this council has taken an approach which is member-led and has developed a number of processes and structures around learning and development. And indeed, there is, to that end, an elected member development group which reports into governance and strategic planning. Under the key issues there, we've highlighted that 157 participants in various member development activities in the past year, 42% of that learning was provided internally by council officers. Also, we see that there was a high level of satisfaction, with 96% of participants indicating that they had satisfaction levels of good or excellent. And then the majority of participants also indicated that their training objectives were met, their knowledge and skills had improved, and it had a positive impact on performance. Again, we're satisfied at 3.1.5 that all the courses delivered by council demonstrated value for money. And again, we've taken on board the comments and feedback members have provided in terms of areas for improvement, and they're identified in Appendix 3. In terms of overall costs, we've estimated the overall cost of training was £5,010 or £5,011, 1,500 of which was in-kind costs due to the internal input to the development courses. Again, in terms of 3.4, and I think this is again for member consideration. It's noted that the council has participated very successfully in the Charter and Charter Plus awards for elected member development since 2016, and there are costs attached to that accreditation, namely, as indicated there, it's 2,500 is the figure that we have at the minute for 2025, but there are also in-kind costs in terms of officer time for preparation for that assessment, and they again are estimated at over £2,000. This issue is discussed by the member development group, and I think the conclusion was that the cost and time involved in the Charter Plus assessment process outweighed the value. And it's also noted that we currently subscribe to NILGA, and even if we don't go forward with Charter Plus, we would still be able to avail of their member and learning development, and also any training courses that may be of interest to members. So consequently, the recommendation to you today is that you note all the updates. Again, subject to your comments about ceasing participation in the elected member learning and development Charter Plus award, we will reflect that in the action plan for 24-25, which again we seek your approval for. Thank you, members.
Thanks, Alan. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alan, for a very comprehensive report. But the bottom line is white paper twice for something that you can get anyway. And the recommendation makes that pretty clear. And I have no hesitation in proposing the recommendation as before us.
Councillor Heaney.
Chair, just to welcome the report and thank Ellen, and I'm happy to second the recommendation.
Okay, so proposal from Councillor Hussey and seconded by Councillor Heaney. No further indicated speakers. We'll take that as unanimous. Okay, so we're no longer Charter Plus status. Members, item 13 and 14 are open for information. I'm going to take them as read. Does anybody want to comment or ask any questions?
Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Tierney.
Thank you. It's item 14, the list of deputations. And I'm just noticing in regards to the meeting scheduled for the 26th of November, there's two deputations on at that meeting, one from DSC in Fort George and the other one from NA Water. It's my view that they're going to be two big talking points. And I'm just wondering, when we were laying out the schedule, is there any particular reason why two such important deputations were put under the one, given the fact that we're going to have other papers to come as well?
Subject to reading Rachel's mind, members, I think it's because A, we were trying to get them in before Christmas, and B, we hope the agenda for the 26th of November will be relatively light. because we've had a meeting on the 6th of November, and therefore we will attempt to keep the other papers to a minimum to enable those 2 deputations. Other than that, we could separate them, but that would therefore mean we would have to move it to after Christmas. How does that sound, Rachel? Yeah, okay.
Okay, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Turner, for pointing that out, which everybody will have seen anyway. And I totally agree. You know, bringing in a couple of delegations, particularly, even if it is a short committee meeting, it doesn't give members time to dwell and to examine fully the issues, important issues that have been brought to us, for many of us, particularly with regard to NI water at this present moment in time. Members will have heard me before saying that for these delegations, I seriously believe that we should have a special council meeting and bring a couple of delegations in to that, because the issues that are to be debated there are not just of relevance to the committee, and I know folk can come into the committee, etc., but they're issues that should concern all across the chamber, and it should be done on that basis, unless there is a very specific item that is very specific to a particular committee. But we are where we are, and you know, if we want these people in, and if they can come, then okay, maybe we have to shortcut here and bring them in committee. But that's not how I felt it should be done. Thank you, Chair.
And I note those comments. But well, we've got another meeting prior to that meeting on the 26th. So it's something we can monitor if there's if we and we can review again and take people's thoughts on it at the next meeting. But the next meeting, the deputation on the 6th of November, is the Housing Executives Investment Plan, which everybody will agree is it's a deputation that members look forward to. So, and it's a massive issue right across our city and district. So it's only right that there's a single deputation next month, and we'll review the 26th of November after that, the next meeting. So thanks for raising it, Councillor Tierney. And just in relation to participation and the committees, and I would not only allow or permit people, non-members of the committee, I would encourage non-members of the committee to participate and attend. And hopefully now that we're moved back into the hybrid format, more members of council, non-members of committee will avail of that opportunity. Councillor Tierney.
Chair, just to say thanks to John for the explanation, which I totally accept. And when you explain it the way you have, it makes a good idea to put 2 together and get it done before Christmas. Alderman Hussey started by saying that he agreed with me. I didn't actually say anything that he could agree with. I just asked a question. I'm not suggesting that we decouple them. I'm quite happy the way they are, given the explanation by the Chief Executive. Thank you.
Okay, can I get a proposal to go into confidential? Councillor Mooney, Councillor McGinley.